be moving into Mar-a-Lago. He has a private apartment there in Mar-a-Lago. He and his wife will be moving in there. On the right-hand side of your screen, we see the Capitol building here in Washington, D.C., where dignitaries are gathered. There is Mike Pence, the vice president, still vice president of the United States under Donald Trump. He did not go to Andrews Air Force Base to say goodbye to President Trump. He did not go to the White House this morning to say goodbye to President Trump. He has been a loyal foot soldier for this president, defending his many controversial policies, the separation of families at the border, the ban on people from majority Muslim countries entering the United States early on. Mike Pence stood by Donald Trump throughout his presidency, but he broke with him on the issue of whether the election was free and fair, and Mike Pence just would not go as far as Donald Trump wanted him to go in fighting the election results. And here he is the representative of the Trump administration on that platform. He will be standing in effectively for Donald Trump to pass the baton from the 45th president to the 46th president. We are then expecting, after the Pences, the running order that we have been given by the White House is that we will have the Vice President-elect Kamala Harris and Doug Emhoff. They will be the next to come out. There's Bill Clinton, George Bush just behind him. And it is an extraordinary scene, this, as we watch. Power in Washington, power in America is shifting. It is shifting from the left-hand side of your screen to the right-hand side of your screen. It is shifting from Donald Trump, who is leaving office, defeated as a one-term president, to Joe Biden, who has, on his third attempt for the US presidency, will finally be taking the oath of office as the oldest president ever in American history, and he will have a vice president who is also making history as the first woman and the first person of color, also as a vice president. We can speak now to Stephanie Rawlings-Blake. She is former mayor of Baltimore and was close to the, I'm going to, 1 second before we go to the mayor, because there is Donald Trump. We were talking about a split screen. Melania has changed. She was left Washington in a black, this is Melania Trump pays close attention to her clothes. She has left in one rather somber outfit. She has arrived in Florida in a suitably sunny dress. Perhaps no secret that Melania Trump is happy to be leaving Washington. She was never particularly keen to take up her position in the White House. She liked her life as a private citizen in New York, and now she can resume life as a private citizen down in Florida. So that's it. Donald Trump gets into his SUV and he drives off to Mar-a-Lago. And we can say goodbye to the Trump presidency. It is perhaps as important a moment in this day in American history that the country is saying goodbye to Donald Trump, who has left without even attending the inauguration of his successor, and that his family is leaving too. His family, who also broke precedent by having members of the family there in offices right next to the president in the Oval Office as his advisors, and that they will be scattered around the country. Many of them perhaps have political ambitions. There could be some Shakespearean rivalry there between those siblings, Ivanka, Don Jr., even perhaps Eric, who all have political ambitions of his own. Still president at the moment, so he still gets the trappings. You can see there is the president's seal on the door of the SUV. He has the flags, and for another, what are we looking at, 58 minutes or so, Donald Trump is still president. In the Constitution, power does not, whenever the oath of office is taken, and there's been some dispute because under our timetable that we have, it looks like Joe Biden might actually take the oath of office before midday here on the East Coast of Washington, D.C. That does not make him president. The clock will make Joe Biden president. Donald Trump stops being president at noon, and his successor takes over after that. And Donald Trump has gone. We are back to Washington, the new power here in Washington, and Stephanie Rawlings-Blake, former mayor of Baltimore, joins us. Mayor, it is worth us closing the page on Donald Trump's presidency and seeing that he has left, because, and it is a very important moment in politics in this country, that Donald Trump has kind of slunk out of town on this inauguration day as a defeated one-term president because he has been such a tumultuous figure in American politics.
Definitely. His presidency has been pretty much a disaster. The esteem of our country around the world has been diminished, and I think it is time for us to reassess the strength of our democracy and see if we can move together as a united country, the United States.
Can I ask you about the incoming president and the incoming vice president-elect? You worked with them on their campaign. How much is going to change now in the United States with a new team?
So much is going to change, primarily because the Biden-Harris administration is committed to putting the best and the brightest people with experience in positions of power, which is starkly different.
Here is Kamala Harris. I'm just going to interrupt because here we see Kamala Harris, the vice president-elect, and her husband, Doug Emhoff, who likes to describe himself as the second husband. Which is, I don't know that we have a title yet, actually, officially for him.
TV, I'm sure.
He is a female vice president, which in itself is a historic moment. So we're going to have to come up with a title for Doug Emhoff, who has been her husband. I'm rooting for a second gent, 6 years. Second gent. Some people have suggested it's a second dude. I'm not quite sure that gives it quite the elevated title it deserves. But Stephanie, when you see these pictures of Kamala Harris making her way through the Capitol, about to be sworn in as America's first female vice president and first vice president of color, so many barriers being broken by Kamala Harris at this moment, and so many messages being sent to young girls and people of color right around this country, aren't there?
There are. I mean, I remember as a young child, my father was very intentional about introducing me to elected women, women with power and stature. And I knew at that point that that was a possibility for me. So it just fills me with so much emotion to see this, because I know that there are women, not just in America, but over the globe, who are looking at this and seeing entirely new possibilities for their future.
What will she bring to the Biden administration?
My hope is she will use her experience as a prosecutor and her experience in the Senate to really experience makes her very uniquely qualified to be a real change agent across the country.
And she won't only be vice president, of course. She is going to be the casting vote, the deciding vote in the U.S. Senate as well, isn't she?
She is, and I don't think we will ever see something like we're about to see with this Congress. In the Senate, the role of the vice president has pretty much been a formality. But with the separation and split of Congress the way it is, I expect Vice President Harris will have a much more active role, something, like I said, that will be historic.
And there we have the current vice president, who actually did reach out to Kamala Harris to welcome her, which is as it should be. It is the tradition here at these inaugurations. But of course, we didn't see it. And there she is saying hello. She has a long, extended blended family. Another thing about Kamala Harris, she's a stepmom. And there are, of course, millions of step-parents around the country, too, who will be seeing this stepmother who is very close to her, the children of her husband, who call her Momala, and they are there on the podium with her. So a big blended family that comes from, her mother came from India, her father came from Jamaica, she has step-parents from her Jewish husband. You couldn't get much more of an American story. Now I'm laying out the Harris family. I realize we really do have an American story, don't we there, Stephanie?
It is the patchwork of the American quilt, all in one family. and it's beautiful.
All right, that they did. 3TV little.
So there we have Kamala Harris, who will become the vice
If you drive
president,
back
the
it and
first
show it
female
cable
vice
everything.
president, the first
I remember saying I'm the
vice
copyright
president of
for flow.
Jamaican descent, the first vice
She was
president
supposed to
of
have it
Indian
for
descent. She is breaking a lot of glass being shattered.
A lot of glass
Buffalo
being
not the
shattered,
band.
and
Buffalo
in
sitting
this
at the
country,
road.
if I may, she's a member of a sorority, the first African American
that's why I put your front.
sorority,
So
Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority,
TV alone.
and a member of another very prominent organization, the Links. And women all across the country are wearing their pink and green and their pearls to celebrate what that means to have members becoming vice president. So it is a day of celebration that no pandemic and no security threat can squelch.
And after this year in which America has seen so much tumult around the issue of racial justice, there has been so much focus on the need for racial justice throughout America. Protests have swept across the world. To have a woman of color come in the position of vice president is a very important, significant moment in American politics. And Joe Biden was determined. He made it very clear. He said early on, after he got the nomination, I am going to choose a woman as my vice presidential nominee, and he made it clear that he wanted to have a woman of color as his vice presidential nominee. And we have Kamala Harris at a moment where America is asking big questions about how the racial divides that have been laid so clear in the country, racial divides that of course African Americans have been well aware of for decades, but perhaps white Americans have more recently become aware of. Those divides have been laid bare, and Joe Biden has it in his very, very busy in tray to try to do something to heal those racial divisions. Having Kamala Harris in this position is an important part of that process of trying to heal those divisions. Stephanie Rawlings-Blake, thank you, former Mayor of Baltimore. Thank you very much for joining me.
House Majority Leader, the Honorable Steny Hoyer, and Mrs. Yvette Lewis.
Let's have a look, because we have more of the dignitaries arriving here.
House of Representatives, the Honorable Nancy Pelosi and Mr. Paul Pelosi. Staff Representative Lindsey Kerr, accompanying the Honorable Amy Klobuchar and Mr. John Bessler. Staff Representative Stephanie Hager-Mucko, accompanying Senate Majority Leader, the Honorable Mitch McConnell and the Honorable Elaine L. Chao. And Staff Representative Rochelle Gray Schroeder, accompanying Chairman
So John Sopel, our North America editor, and here is Joe Biden. Just before we go to John Sopel, that's a little bit more important. Joe Biden and his wife Jill Biden, Dr. Jill Biden, the president-elect, and the woman who is about to become the First Lady of the United States, and will break with tradition again. We are having so many traditions broken because Dr. Jill Biden, who is an educator, has said that she is going to carry on working. She worked when she was vice president's wife. She's going to carry on working now as well. That has not been done before. So they are coming down the stairs onto the platform as well. Let's take a watch. Is the man who has tried to become president 2 times before and failed, has now succeeded, 78 years old. Joe Biden, on his 3rd attempt, is going to be as the 46th president of the United States. And what a time he takes over. What a huge amount he has to do. How much is resting on this man's shoulders. We're just going to listen to him to come out, and then John Sopel's going to join us with his thoughts. There is Amy Klobuchar. She was a presidential candidate. She had perhaps hoped to become the vice presidential nominee. Here we have the announcement.
Ceremonies, Fitzhugh Elder IV, the acting House Senate Sergeant at Arms, Tim Blodgett, and the acting Senate Sergeant at Arms, Jennifer Hemingway.
for the arrival of Joe Biden onto the platform. This is my country.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President-elect of the United States, Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. and Dr. Jill Biden.
As the President-elect comes out onto the platform. John Sokol, you've been watching this as you see Joe Biden finally, after all those years of wanting to be in this position. I'm sure he never quite imagined it would be like this. Didn't think he'd be wearing a mask. Has the right man come for the right moment?
Well, I put it in a different way, Cathy. I don't think any other candidate that was in the Democratic field could have beaten Donald Trump. And I was reading the Barack Obama book, and there was this very interesting line when he was talking about his own run for the presidency. He said, "You don't choose the moment chooses you." And I think this was Joe Biden's moment. At a time of controversy, of division, he was a slightly reassuring figure, had been on the political stage for years, a moderate Democrat, and therefore someone who could perhaps take on Donald Trump and win. The other thing that struck me as I was watching them coming out, they say that in politics that when you're the president or a prime minister, you are at the centre of a force field, and all around you is chaos and noise. But at the epicenter, it is absolutely still. And I just wonder whether, given the security concerns, given everything, Joe Biden felt that calm today, or whether he felt just the turmoil of what has brought us to this moment.
Vice presidents, leaders from abroad, and a whole bunch of Bidens. America, welcome to the 59th presidential inauguration, where in just a few moments, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will take their solemn oaths. This ceremony is the culmination of 244 years of a democracy. It is the moment when leaders brought to this stage by the will of the people promised to be faithful to our Constitution, to cherish it and defend it. It is the moment when they become, as we all should be, guardians of our country. Have we become too jaded, too accustomed to the ritual of the passing of the torch of democracy to truly appreciate what a blessing and a privilege it is to witness this moment? I think not. 2 weeks ago, when an angry, violent mob staged an insurrection and desecrated this temple of our democracy, it awakened us to our responsibilities as Americans. This is the day when our democracy picks itself up, brushes off the dust, and does what America always does. Goes forward as a nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This conveyance of a sacred trust between our leaders and our people takes place in front of this shining Capitol dome for a reason. When Abraham Lincoln gave his first inaugural address in front of this Capitol, the dome was only partially constructed, braced by ropes of steel. He promised he would finish it. He was criticized for spending funds on it during the Civil War. To those critics, he replied, "If the people see the Capitol going
Welcome,
on,
everyone.
it is a sign we intend the Union shall go on." And it did, and it will. Generations of Americans gave their lives to preserve our republic in this place. Great legislation to protect civil rights and economic security and lead the world was debated and crafted under this dome. Now it falls on all of us, not just the two leaders we are inaugurating today, to take up the torch of our democracy, not as a weapon of political arson, but as an instrument for good. We pledge today never to take our democracy for granted as we celebrate its remarkable strength. We celebrate its resilience, its grit. We celebrate the ordinary people doing extraordinary things for our nation, the doctors and nurses on the front line of this pandemic, the officers in the Capitol, a new generation never giving up hope for justice. We celebrate a new president, Joe Biden, who vows to restore the soul of America and cross the river of our divides to a higher plane. And we celebrate our first African American, first Asian American, and first woman vice president, Kamala Harris, who stands on the shoulders of so many on this platform who have forged the way to this day. When she takes the oath of office, little girls and boys across the world will know that anything and everything is possible. And in the end, that is America, our democracy, a country of so much good. And today, on these Capitol steps and before this glorious field of flags, we rededicate ourselves to its cause. Thank you. It is now my honor to introduce to you the senator who has worked with me and so many others to make this ceremony possible. My friend and the chair of the inaugural committee, Missouri Senator Roy Blunt.
Well, I should have known when Senator Klobuchar got involved, at least there'd be a touch of snow up here this morning. Of all the things we'd considered, I don't think snow was on my agenda until I walked out the door a moment ago. But thank you, Senator Klobuchar, and thanks to the other members of the Joint Congressional Committee on the Inauguration as we officially begin the 59th inaugural ceremony. I also want to thank the Joint Committee staff and our partners, particularly our security partners, for the way they've dealt with unprecedented circumstances. When I chaired the inauguration 4 years ago, I shared President Reagan's 1981 description of this event as commonplace and miraculous. Commonplace because we've done it every 4 years since 1789. Miraculous because we've done it every 4 years since 1789. Americans have celebrated this moment during war, during depression, and now during pandemic. Once again, all three branches of our government come together as the Constitution envisions. Once again, we renew our commitment to our determined democracy, forging a more perfect union. That theme for this inauguration, our determined democracy, forging a more perfect union, was announced by the Joint Committee before the election with the belief that the United States can only fulfill its promise and set an example for others if we are always working to be better than we have been. The Constitution established that determined democracy with its first three words, declaring the people as the source of the government. The Articles of Confederation hadn't done that. The Magna Carta hadn't done that. Only the Constitution says the government exists because the people are the source of the reason it exists. They immediately followed those first three words with the words to form a more perfect union. The founders did not say to form a perfect union. They did not claim that in our new country nothing would need to be improved. Fortunately, they understood that always working to be better would be the hallmark of a great democracy. The freedoms we have today, the nation we have today, is not here just because it happened, and they aren't complete. A great democracy working through the successes and failures of our history, striving to be better than it had been. And we are more than we have been, and we are less than we hope to be. The assault on our Capitol at this very place just 2 weeks ago reminds us that a government designed to balance and check itself is both fragile and resilient. During the last year, the pandemic challenged our free and open society and called for extraordinary determination and sacrifice, and still challenges us today. Meeting that challenge head on have been and are healthcare workers, scientists, first responders, essential frontline workers, and so many others we depend on in so many ways. Today we come to this moment, people all over the world, as we're here, are watching and will watch what we do here. Our government comes together, the Congress and the courts join the transition of executive responsibility. One political party more pleased today and on every inaugural day than the other. But this is not a moment of division, it's a moment of unification. A new administration begins and brings with it a new beginning. And with that, our great national debate goes forward, and a determined democracy will continue to be essential in pursuit of a more perfect union and a better future for all Americans. What a privilege for me to join you today. Thank you. I'm pleased to call
Roy Blunt there, who is the only Republican who will be speaking today, stressing unity, which is the theme of this inauguration that Joe Biden has asked for.
And the pledge to our flag.
It is something that Democrats say can't happen until there is accountability for what happened in that Capitol building 2 weeks ago. And they are wiping down the plinth for Father Lee O'Donovan, who will be delivering the invocation. He is a friend of the Biden family, a Jesuit, and he presided over the funeral of Joe Biden's son, Beau.
Gracious and merciful God, at this sacred time we come before you in need, indeed on our knees. But we come still more with hope, and with our eyes raised anew to the vision of a more perfect union in our land, a union of all our citizens to promote the general welfare and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. We are a people of many races, creeds, and colors, national backgrounds, cultures, and styles, now far more numerous and on land much vaster than when Archbishop John Carroll wrote his prayer for the inauguration of George Washington 232 years ago. Archbishop Carroll prayed that you, O Creator of all, would assist with your Holy Spirit of counsel and fortitude the President of these United States, that his administration may be conducted in righteousness and be eminently useful to your people. Today we confess our past failures to live according to our vision of equality, inclusion, and freedom for all. Yet we resolutely commit still more now to renewing the vision, to caring for one another in word and deed, especially the least fortunate among us, and so becoming a light for the world. There is a power in each and every one of us that lives by turning to every other one of us, a thrust of the Spirit to cherish and care and stand by others, and above all, those most in need. It is called love, and its path is to give ever more of itself. Today, it is called American patriotism, born not of power and privilege, but of care for the common good, with malice toward none, and with charity for all. For our new president, we beg of you the wisdom Solomon sought when he knelt before you and prayed for an understanding heart, so that I can govern your people and know the difference between right and wrong. We trust in the counsel of the letter of James. If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. Pope Francis has reminded us how important it is to dream together. By ourselves, he wrote, we risk seeing mirages, things that are not there. Dreams, on the other hand, are built together. Be with us, holy mystery of love, as we dream together. Help us under our new president to reconcile the people of our land, restore our dream and invest it with peace and justice and the joy that is the overflow of love. To the glory of your name, forever, amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, please remain standing for the presentation of our national colors by the Armed Forces Color Guard, the singing of our national anthem, and for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Guys, I'm going to fix the phone so that you can see it better.
For the singing of our national anthem, accompanied by the President's own United States Marine Band, please welcome Lady Gaga.
Lady Gaga in by Lady Gaga standards, a relatively subdued inaugural outfit, appropriate for the moment.
Make sure you remember the national anthem, you know. Get them see how fix it.
I need to rethink my outfit. I am clearly grossly underdressed for this occasion. I'm now going to have to try and find a massive big gold brooch and a gold microphone to go with it. Lady Gaga, who worked with the Biden and Obama administrations when Barack Obama was president and campaigned for Joe Biden, they're belting out the Pledge of Allegiance. Ron Christie, former advisor to George W. Bush. I'm not quite sure who it was, Ron, who sang the Pledge of Allegiance. Who sung the national anthem back when George Bush was inaugurated. But that wasn't bad, was it?
Good day, Catty. No, she certainly brought down the house, and by Lady Gaga standards, boy, she was pretty understated. But it was a great recitation of our national anthem.
Now we have Andrea Hall reading the Pledge of Allegiance.
States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
What you are all about to be part of, America, is a historic moment of firsts. To administer the oath to our first African American, our first Asian American, and our first woman vice president, Kamala Harris, it is my great privilege to welcome to the inaugural stage the first Latina to ever serve on the Supreme Court of the United States of America, Justice Sonia Sotomayor.
Gentlemen, please remain standing for the oath of office, followed by musical honors.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Kamala Davy Harris, do solemnly swear.
I, Kamala Davy Harris, do solemnly swear.
That I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
That I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
Against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same.
That I take this obligation freely.
That I take this obligation freely.
Without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion.
Without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion.
That I will well and faithfully discharge.
That I will well and faithfully discharge.
The duties of the office on which I am about to enter.
The duties of the office upon which I am about to enter.
So help me God.
So help me God.
All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated.
Yes, sir.
Please welcome Jennifer Lopez to perform This Land Is Your Land and America the Beautiful, accompanied by members of the President's own United States Marine Band.
And Jennifer Lopez, who is joining the star-studded inauguration, J-Lo coming out also to perform. She will be singing an American musical selection. She has been considered, of course, one of the most influential Latin entertainers in American history, and has been a campaigner for Joe Biden as well, and a staunch ally of this vice president, of this president-elect. Following on from Lady Gaga.
This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Islands, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. As I went walking down that ribbon of highway, I saw above me that endless skyway. I saw below me that golden valley. This land was made for you and me. Oh, this land, oh, this land. This land was made for you and me. Oh, this land, oh, this land. This land was made for you and me. You and me. Oh, America, America, God shed His grace on thee and crowned thy good with brotherhood. From sea to shining sea. Una nación bajo Dios indivisible con libertad y justicia para todos. Was made for you and me.
Compilation there of This Land and America the Beautiful from Jennifer Lopez, who has been an outspoken advocate of how the coronavirus has disproportionately affected Hispanics in America, and they're taking her place as the most influential Latin American
Chief Justice Roberts
entertainer in the country at the moment.
It is now my distinct honor to introduce
Senator Klobuchar, by the way, known for her sense of humor.
John Roberts to administer the presidential oath to the next President of the United States, Joseph R. Biden.
Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the oath of office, followed by musical honors.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Joseph Robinette Biden Jr., do solemnly swear.
I, Joseph Robinette Biden Jr., do solemnly swear.
That I will faithfully execute.
That I will faithfully execute.
The office of President of the United States.
Office of President of the United States.
And will, to the best of my ability.
Will, to the best of my ability.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
preserve, protect, and defend
the Constitution of the United States.
the Constitution of the United States.
So help you God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
That is covered under the blood of Jesus.
Well, that was short and sweet. Joe Biden has waited his entire political career for that moment. It took less than a minute. And the Chief Justice of the United States declared Joe Biden President of the United States at 11:48 in the morning. Technically, he is not president for another 11 minutes. Under the Constitution, it is absolutely clear. One person is president until midday, and the next person takes over from that. But I suspect nobody is quibbling with that right now. For the sake of 11 minutes, Joe Biden has just been called President of the United States. This is the man who has wanted this for his entire political life. He tried 2 times and failed. The 3rd time's a charm. Joe Biden, the 46th President of the United States of America. Well, we seem to be taking a little pause now where they have all been asked to take a sit. I'm not sure if they're being asked to wait for 10 minutes until he is actually president, but there is some kind of a pause we would be expecting at this moment. I'm not quite sure whether we call him the president or whether we call him the president-elect. I have Amanda Renteria with me, a Democratic strategist and who worked on Hillary Clinton's campaign back in 2016, joining us from California. Amanda, there is a little bit of a pause. There is this we're in this slightly peculiar moment. They're ahead of schedule. That's great. These are the moments where, when you're behind the scenes and you work so hard to get every minute right, you're rarely ahead of schedule, but here we are, we're ahead of schedule, and no doubt we're going to end this administration again in a quite unusual way. But listen, you feel the sense of energy and hope and new perspective and voices on that platform, and it makes all the difference here.
It is now my great privilege and high
Let's just take a listen to Amy Klobuchar.
The first person to officially introduce the 46th President of the United States, Joseph R. Biden Jr.
Chief Justice Roberts, Vice President Harris, Speaker Pelosi, Leader Schumer, Leader McConnell, Vice President Pence, my distinguished guests, my fellow Americans. This is America's day. This is democracy's day. A day of history and hope, of renewal and resolve. Through a crucible for the ages, America has been tested anew, and America has risen to the challenge. Today, we celebrate the triumph not of a candidate, but of a cause, the cause of democracy. The people, the will of the people has been heard, and the will of the people has been heeded. We've learned again that democracy is precious. Democracy is fragile. And at this hour, my friends, democracy has prevailed. So now, on this hallowed ground where just a few days ago, violence sought to shake the Capitol's very foundation, we come together as one nation, under God, indivisible, to carry out the peaceful transfer of power as we have for more than as we look ahead in our uniquely American way, restless, bold, optimistic, and set our sights on a nation we know we can be and we must be. I thank my predecessors of both parties for their presence here today.
Yes.
I thank them from the bottom of my heart. And I know the resilience of our Constitution and the strength of our nation, as does President Carter, who I spoke with last night, who cannot be with us today, but whom we salute for his lifetime in service. I've just taken the sacred oath each of those patriots have taken. The oath first sworn by George Washington. But the American story depends not on any one of us, not on some of us, but on all of us, on we the people who seek a more perfect union. This is a great nation. We're good people. And over the centuries, through storm and strife, in peace and in war, we've come so far, but we still have far to go. We'll press forward with speed and urgency, for we have much to do in this winter of peril. Unity is the path forward. And we must meet this moment as the United States of America. If we do that, I guarantee you we will not fail. We have never, ever, ever, ever failed in America. We've acted together. And so today, at this time, in this place, let's start afresh, all of us. Let's begin to listen to one another again, hear one another, see one another, show respect to one another. Politics doesn't have to be a raging fire, destroying everything in its path. Every disagreement doesn't have to be a cause for total war. And we must reject the culture in which facts themselves are manipulated and even manufactured. My fellow Americans, we have to be different than this. America has to be better than this. And I believe America is so much better than this. Just look around. Here we stand in the shadow of the Capitol Dome, as was mentioned earlier, completed amid the Civil War, when the Union itself was literally hanging in the balance. Yet we endured. We prevailed. Here we stand, looking out on the Great Mall, where Dr. King spoke of his dream. Here we stand, where 108 years ago, at another inaugural, thousands of protesters tried to block brave women marching for the right to vote. And today, we mark the swearing in of the first woman in American history elected to national office, Vice President Kamala Harris. Don't tell me things can't change. Here we stand, across the Potomac from Arlington Cemetery, where heroes who gave the last full measure of devotion rest in eternal peace. And here we stand, just days after a riotous mob thought they could use violence to silence the will of the people, to stop the work of our democracy, to drive us from this sacred ground. It did not happen. It will never happen. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. Not ever. To all those who supported our campaign, I'm humbled by the faith you placed in us. To all those who did not support us, let me say this. Hear me out as we move forward. Take a measure of me and my heart. If you still disagree, so be it. That's democracy. That's America. The right to dissent peaceably within the guardrails of our republic is perhaps this nation's greatest strength. Yet hear me clearly. Disagreement must not lead to disunion. And I pledge this to you. I will be a president for all Americans, all Americans. And I promise you, I will fight as hard for those who did not support me as for those who did. Many centuries ago, St. Augustine, a saint of my church, wrote that a people was a multitude defined by the common objects of their love. Defined by the common objects of their love. What are the common objects we as Americans love that define us as Americans? I think we know. Opportunity, security, liberty, dignity, respect, honor, and yes, the truth. Recent weeks and months have taught us a painful lesson. There is truth and there are lies. Lies told for power and for profit. And each of us has a duty and a responsibility as citizens, as Americans, and especially as leaders. Leaders who have pledged to honor our Constitution and protect our nation, to defend the truth and defeat the lies. Look, I understand that many of my fellow Americans view the future with fear and trepidation. I understand they worry about their jobs. I understand, like my dad, they lay there at night staring at the ceiling, wondering, can I keep my health care? Can I pay my mortgage? Thinking about their families, about what comes next. I promise you, I get it. But the answer is not to turn inward, to retreat into competing factions, distrusting those who don't look like you, or worship the way you do, or don't get their news from the same sources you do. We must end this uncivil war that pits red against blue, rural versus urban, or rural versus urban, conservative versus liberal. We can do this if we open our souls instead of hardening our hearts, if we show a little tolerance and humility, and if we're willing to stand in the other person's shoes, as my mom would say, just for a moment, stand in their shoes. Because here's the thing about life. There's no accounting for what fate will deal you. Some days, when you need a hand. There are other days when we're called to lend a hand. That's how it has to be. That's what we do for one another. And if we are this way, our country will be stronger, more prosperous, more ready for the future. And we can still disagree. My fellow Americans, in the work ahead of us, we're going to need each other. We need all our strength to persevere through this dark winter. We're entering what may be the toughest and deadliest period of the virus. We must set aside politics and finally face this pandemic as one nation. One nation. And I promise you this, as the Bible says, weeping may endure for a night, but joy cometh in the morning. We will get through this together. Together. Look, folks, all my colleagues I serve with in the House and the Senate up here, we all understand the world is watching all of us today. So here's my message to those beyond our borders. America has been tested, and we've come out stronger for it. We will repair our alliances and engage with the world once again. Not to meet yesterday's challenges, but today's and tomorrow's challenges. And we'll lead not merely by the example of our power, but by the power of our example. We'll be a strong and trusted partner for peace, progress, and security. Look, you all know we've been through so much in this nation. And my first act as president, I'd like to ask you to join me in a moment of silent prayer. Remember all of those who we lost in this past year to the pandemic. Those 400,000 fellow Americans, moms, dads, husbands, wives, sons, daughters, friends, neighbors, and co-workers. We'll honor them for becoming the people and the nation we know we can and should be. So I ask you, let's say a silent prayer for those who've lost their lives and those left behind, and for our country. Amen. Folks, this is a time of testing. We face an attack on our democracy and on truth, a raging virus, growing inequity, the sting of systemic racism, a climate in crisis, America's role in the world. Any one of these would be enough to challenge us in profound ways. But the fact is, we face them all at once, presenting this nation with one of the gravest responsibilities we've had. Now we're going to be tested. Are we going to step up, all of us? It's time for boldness, for there's so much to do. And this is certain. I promise you, we will be judged, you and I, by how we resolve these cascading crises of our era. We will rise to the occasion is the question. Will we master this rare and difficult hour? Will we meet our obligations and pass along a new and better world to our children? I believe we must. I'm sure you do as well. I believe we will. And when we do, we'll write the next great chapter in the history of the United States of America, the American story. A story that might sound something like a song that means a lot to me. It's called American Anthem. There's one verse that stands out, at least for me, and it goes like this. The work and prayers of century have brought us to this day. What shall be our legacy? What will our children say? Let me know in my heart when my days are through. America, America, I gave my best to you. Let's us add our own work and prayers to the unfolding story of our great nation. If we do this, then when our days are through, our children and our children's children will say of us, they gave their best, they did their duty, they healed a broken land. My fellow Americans, I close the day where I began, with the sacred oath. Before God and all of you, I give you my word. I will always level with you. I will defend the Constitution. I'll defend our democracy. I'll defend America. And I'll give all of you, keep everything I do in your service, thinking not of power, but of possibilities, not of personal interest, but the public good. And together, we shall write an American story of hope, not fear, of unity, not division, of light, not darkness, a story of decency and dignity, love and healing, greatness and goodness. May this be the story that guides us, the story that inspires us, and the story that tells ages yet to come that we answered the call of history. We met the moment. Democracy and hope, truth and justice did not die on our watch but thrived. That America secured liberty at home and stood once again as a beacon to the world. That is what we owe our forebears, one another, and generation to follow. So, with purpose and resolve, we turn to those tasks of our time, sustained by faith, driven by conviction, devoted to one another and the country we love with all our hearts. May God bless America, and may God protect our troops. Thank you, America.
Joseph R. Biden, who is now the 46th President of the United States of America, with his inaugural speech in which he sought unity. He talked about unity not just as the end, but as the means to healing the country. He was honest about the challenges that America faces, and particularly about the pandemic. He talked about this as a winter of peril, but called for all Americans to help each other. There are days when you lend a hand, there are days when you need a hand. And he asked Americans to come together in this moment of peril, of tragedy, as he called it, and laid out the huge things that the country has to face, but that also he has to face, that he, as the next president of the United States, now has to deal with. He became president halfway through his inaugural speech. He became president at 12:01 local time. Here is Garth Brooks, who will be singing Amazing Grace.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun. I have to ask you to sing this last verse with me. Not just the people here, but the people at home, at work, as one, united. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see.
Amazing Grace, karaoke style, at an inauguration. Another first. John Sokol's been listening along with me. I had Amazing Grace at my wedding. It wasn't sung quite like that, I have to say.
Cathy, I'm still kind of trying to digest, analyse the speech that Joe Biden has delivered. And what he was doing was walking a tightrope. He wanted to repudiate Donald Trump and Trumpism, although, of course, he didn't actually mention Donald Trump's name once in that speech. But he was reaching out to Donald Trump's supporters, that he would be governing for all Americans, that it was time to end this uncivil war, as he called it. And it talked about the tough work ahead. I also thought, you know, that we talk about a new dawn and a new era beginning, but you look at what Joe Biden has got to deal with: the pandemic, racism, the state of the economy, the state of the environment, all these massive issues in a country that is bitterly divided and contesting what is truth and what are lies. And trying to establish a dialogue in that situation is going to be the most daunting challenge, I would say, for him. The sentiments of bringing the country together
But how do you do that?
Unity is not just the end, it is the means. The question is whether this country has the capacity for it. This is Amanda Gorman. She is the nation's first ever youth poet laureate.
President, Dr. Biden, Madam Vice President, Mr. Emhoff, Americans, and the world. When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? The loss we carry, a sea we must wade. We've braved the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace. In the norms and notions of what just isn't always just is. And yet, the dawn is ours before we knew it. Somehow we do it. Somehow we've weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply unfinished. We, the successors of a country and a time where a skinny black girl descended from slaves and raised by a single mother can dream of becoming president, only to find herself reciting for one. And yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine, but that doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that is perfect. We are striving to forge our union with purpose, to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man. And so we lift our gaze not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. We close the divide because we know to put our future first. We must first put our differences aside. We lay down our arms so we can reach out our arms to one another. We seek harm to none and harmony for all. Let the globe, if nothing else, say this is true. That even as we grieved, we grew, that even as we hurt, we hoped, that even as we tired, we tried, that we'll forever be tied together, victorious, not because we will never again know defeat, but because we will never again sow division. Scripture tells us to envision that everyone shall sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid. If we're to live up to our own time, then victory won't lie in the blade, but in all the bridges we've made. That is the promised glade, the hill we climb, if only we dare it, because being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the past we step into and how we repair it. We've seen a force that would shatter our nation rather than share it, would destroy our country if it meant delaying democracy. And this effort very nearly succeeded. But while democracy can be periodically delayed, it can never be permanently defeated. In this truth, in this faith we trust, for while we have our eyes on the future, history has its eyes on us. This is the era of just redemption. We feared it at its inception. We did not feel prepared to be the heirs of such a terrifying hour, but within it we found the power to author a new chapter, to offer hope and laughter to ourselves. So, while once we asked, how could we possibly prevail over catastrophe? Now we assert, how could catastrophe possibly prevail over us? We will not march back to what was, but move to what shall be, a country that is bruised but whole, benevolent but bold, fierce and free. We will not be turned around or interrupted by intimidation, because we know our inaction and inertia will be the inheritance of the next generation. Our blunders become their burdens. But one thing is certain: if we merge mercy with might and might with right, then love becomes our legacy and change. A country better than the one we were left with every breath from my bronze-pounded chest. We will raise this wounded world into a wondrous one. We will rise from the gold-limbed hills of the West. We will rise from the windswept Northeast, where our forefathers first realized revolution. We will rise from the lake-rimmed cities of the Midwestern states. We will rise from the sun-baked South. We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover in every known nook of our nation, in every corner called our country. Our people, diverse and beautiful, will emerge battered and beautiful. When day comes, we step out of the shade of flame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it. For there is always light if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it.
Amanda Gorman, the nation's youngest ever poet laureate, 22 years old, and as a girl had a speech impediment like somebody else up on that stage, Joe Biden, who has overcome a stutter to get where he has got to today.
For benediction, I'm pleased to introduce
Giving that
Reverend
poem.
Dr. Sylvester Beeman, the pastor
And we will now have the benediction from Dr. Sylvester Beeman.
Church in Wilmington, Delaware, a friend of President Biden for 30 years.
As a nation and people of faith gathered in this historical moment, let us unite in prayer. God, we gather under the beauty of your holiness and the holiness of your beauty. We seek your face, your smile, your warm embrace. We petition you once more in this celebration. We pray for divine favor upon our President, Joseph R. Biden, and our First Lady, Dr. Jill Biden, and their family. We further ask that you would extend the same favor upon our Vice President, Kamala D. Harris, and our second gentleman, Doug Emhoff, and their family. More than ever, they and our nation need you. We need you, for in you we discover our common humanity. In our common humanity, we will seek out the wounded and bind their wounds. We will seek healing for those who are sick and diseased. We will mourn our dead. We will befriend the lonely, the least, and the left out. We will share our abundance with those who are hungry. We will do justly to the oppressed, acknowledge sin, and seek forgiveness, thus grasping reconciliation. In discovering our humanity, we will seek the good in and for all our neighbors. We will love the unlovable, remove the stigma of the so-called untouchables. We will care for our most vulnerable, our children, the elderly, emotionally challenged, and the poor. We will seek rehabilitation beyond correction. We will extend opportunity to those locked out of opportunity. We will make friends of our enemies. We will make friends of our enemies. People, your people, shall no longer raise up weapons against one another. We will rather use our resources for the national good and become a beacon of life and goodwill to the world. And neither shall we learn hatred anymore. We will lie down in peace, not make our neighbors afraid. In you, oh God, we discover our humanity. In our humanity, we discover our commonness. Beyond the difference of color, creed, origin, political party, ideology, geography, and personal preferences. We'll become greater stewards of your environment, preserving the land, reaping from it a sustainable harvest, and securing its wonder and miracle-giving power for generations to come. This is our benediction, that from these hallowed grounds, where slaves labored to build this shrine and citadel to liberty and democracy, let us all acknowledge, from the indigenous Native American to those who recently received their citizenship, from the African American to those whose foreparents came from Europe and every corner of the globe, from the wealthy to those struggling to make it, from every human being regardless of their choices, that this is our country. As such, teach us, O God. As such, teach us, O God, to live in it, love in it, be healed in it, and reconcile to one another in it, lest we miss kingdom's goal. To your glory, majesty, dominion, and power forever. Hallelujah. Glory, hallelujah. In the strong name of our collective faith. Amen.
Please remain standing as the Armed Forces Color Guard retires our national colors.
Reverend Beeman there closing out most of the spoken part, at least, of this inauguration ceremony. Now we have the exiting of the colours, and then the dignitaries will all leave as well. Let's just watch the colours go.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated and remain in your seats while the President and official party depart the platform. For safety reasons, your ushers will release your section in an organized manner, following the playing of our national march, The Stars and Stripes Forever.
And there we have the President and the new First Lady, Joe Biden and Dr. Jill Biden. Behind them, Kamala Harris, the new Vice President, and her husband, Doug Emhoff, leaving the stage. Not an inauguration that he necessarily would have wanted, much more socially distanced, many fewer people, not a national mall with a throng of crowds down below it, but John Sopel, you were listening along with me. I think they managed to capture that spirit that we see at every inauguration of celebration, of taking power. There is that sense of moment that comes from all of those bits of this ceremony.
Cathy, when you look at the Capitol from the Mall and you look up onto the West Front, it looks like any other inauguration, maybe a bit more socially distanced. It's when you look the other way, down the Mall, towards the Washington Monument, and you see just the flags and no people, that you realise that this is an exceptional inauguration. And in the emptiness, you see the twin issues that Joe Biden has got to grapple with. The pandemic, one of the reasons why there are no crowds, and the security situation. It was 2 weeks ago today that Donald Trump was just finishing up his speech at the Ellipse, and the crowd moved towards the Capitol. 2 weeks ago, unbelievably, astonishingly, I was reporting on a mob taking over the Capitol. It was the triumph of the mob. 2 weeks later, we are back and we're reporting on the triumph of democracy. And maybe it was always destined that that would happen. But I have to say that 2 weeks ago, it didn't seem like that. It seemed that US democracy was in a moment of grave peril and fragility. And the fact that today has gone with such normality, and with the speeches in the order that they were laid out, and with the address that Joe Biden gave, I think there'll be a huge number of people across America, Republican and Democrat, who will maybe be breathing a sigh of relief. They may not have signed up to Biden. They may absolutely loathe what he stands for. They may still be wishing with all their heart that Donald Trump is the next president. But if you believe in democracy, then there has been today the peaceful transfer of power.
Yeah, and for those members of Congress who were sitting on that stage today, who 2 weeks ago were cowering under their desks, afraid for their lives. I have spoken to many of them who said they have a sense of PTSD. They're calling their family members, and they didn't know if they were going to make it through the end of the day. And for those members of Congress, both Republican and Democrat, to sit there and watch this transition of power take place, and to hear Republicans as well as Democrats today talk about the need for unity, as you say, restores a sense that American democracy is resilient. It may not be at its strongest moment ever, but it is resilient, and this inauguration ceremony helps the country heal just by the fact that it took place without incident for the last 2 hours on the steps of the Capitol. That in and of itself has been an important part of the process of rebuilding faith in America around the world and rebuilding confidence in politics and in democracy and in leadership in this country for Democrat and Republican alike. Let's go to the friend of now Vice President Kamala Harris, Dr. Shelley Young Tompkins. Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Tompkins. I imagine watching your childhood friend being inaugurated as the Vice President must have been an extraordinary emotional moment for you. You could feel the emotion on the stage. Dr. Young Tompkins, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
I imagine that was an emotional moment for you.
Very emotional, very emotional.
At one point, I heard somebody, I think, cry out just after she took the oath of office, "That's right," or "You go." I haven't heard that in inauguration ceremonies before, but clearly there were a lot of people on that stage rooting for her. Not just because of Kamala Harris, the person, but because of all that she represents.
Absolutely.
Did you think that your childhood friend would get to this moment?
You know, I never imagined that she would be the Vice President of the United States, but at the same time, I'm not at all surprised. You know, it reminds me that you can't take anyone for granted because you never know who you may be entertaining. So I've always seen her as a woman with great fortitude and strength. And so I didn't imagine it, but again, I'm not surprised.
When you were, I know we have the photographs of the two of you when you were at Howard University together. You were in your freshman year at university. What kind of a student was she?
Well, I would really say that, you know, she was all about business. So she was not only studious in terms of going to classes, we were both in economics classes together, but also she worked. And so I feel like, you know, as a person, she has a greater understanding for, you know, what the demands are for, I'm going to say, the average person, you know. And so I see her as a person of great empathy. And part of that, I would say, came out of her own experiences. So very much focused on what needed to be done and who she could help.
Her mother, Shyamala Gopalan, was an Indian breast cancer scientist who came from India to America in 1960. She always talks a lot about her mother, how close they were. How important has her mother been to Kamala in forming her and preparing her for this role that she now needs to take on?
I would say absolutely essential that her mom taught her those foundational values and taught her about what was important and how it's her responsibility to not stand on the sidelines, but instead to do your part. And I think today that she probably sees her role as not only an obligation and a privilege, but it's one in which she can actually fulfill that desire and those values that her mother instilled in her when she was just a little girl.
Okay, Shelley Young Tompkins, thank you very much for joining us. We're seeing there his Vice President Mike Pence and his wife Karen Pence. They will be accompanied out. There is a traditional goodbye. I don't know if you remember from 4 years ago. It was slightly awkward, the moment where Barack Obama and Michelle Obama were saying goodbye, and Donald Trump and Melania Trump walked down with them. It was all slightly tense. Of course, Donald Trump's not here. He didn't take part in that event, so he won't be there to be said goodbye to. Instead, it will be the Vice President, Kamala Harris, saying goodbye to the former Vice President, Mike Pence, who did show up. So we will watch that when we come to that. John Sopel, you were reflecting on this pared down but still powerful ceremony for a pared down yet powerful moment in American history. And I was just wondering, as you were talking about unity and the way that Joe Biden framed the need for unity, not just as something that was a lovely idea to aspire to, but as the only way, as the tool that was necessary for America to deal with the problems that it faces at the moment, this moment of intense crisis on so many fronts. And what he seemed to be saying is, we can't do it. We can't fix these problems unless we have unity. I'm watching all of these people on Capitol Hill shaking each other's hands in this moment of sort of, happiness from Republicans and Democrats. But does Capitol Hill, does Washington, does the body politic have that tool in its toolbox? Does it have the tool of unity?
That's such a good question, because, of course, there are so many people on Capitol Hill in whose interest it is best served for there to be division. The political parties, don't want to accommodate each other. Mitch McConnell, who will now become the Senate minority leader, the leading Republican in the Senate, once famously held up his hand, look, you think I give a damn about unity? I'm doing what's best for my caucus. I'm doing what's best for the Republican Party. But I do think that we cannot overstate the significance of the events of the past 2 weeks, where American democracy came up to the abyss and looked over the edge and saw the chaos, the possibility that a civil war could erupt again, not between the North and the South, but between urban and rural, between educated and uneducated. And I think that Joe Biden, more than anyone at this moment, is probably the person best placed to try to turn the volume down, to turn the heat down, to lessen the tension, to try to bring American people together. Now, whether he succeeds or not, who knows? Who knows whether he will be an effective president? But if you look at everything about his background, he is a consensual figure. He is somebody who worked across the aisle. He is the first president since Gerald Ford who is really a creature of the Senate. And therefore, maybe he will be able to work across the aisle and bring people together a bit more. And maybe that will permeate down to a different understanding where Americans are not quite as angry with each other, not pitted against each other in such a bitter and uncomprehending way that I think they are at the moment, where one tribe doesn't understand anything about the other tribe and it's reversed in the same direction.
That would be nice. John Sopel, our North America editor, thank you very much for joining us. Just to explain what you're watching, on the west side of the Capitol where the inauguration took place, you're still seeing the dignitaries chatting with each other, saying goodbye to each other. On the other side, the east side of the Capitol, I'm afraid we have no control over the pictures. They come to us when they come to us. But I just want to tell you what we were seeing. You're getting the senior leadership of Congress getting ready to say goodbye to the outgoing administration. Normally, it would be the president of the outgoing administration. He did not show up today, so his vice president, Mike Pence, who you can see there, and his wife, Karen, will walk down those steps, accompanied by the new vice president, Kamala Harris, and her husband, Doug Emhoff, and they will, if you like, this is the moment where they pass the baton and the doors open and he leaves. Democracy is made up partly of rules. In America, those are written down in the Constitution, and it is made up partly of norms and traditions. What we are watching today is one of the most important traditions in American democracy, the peaceful transfer of power on Inauguration Day. This one has been disrupted. It has not happened as it normally does. But this moment of the Vice President, former Vice President Mike Pence saying goodbye, is the old administration peacefully saying goodbye. It was a one-term administration. They would have liked to have been a two-term administration. But what you are seeing here is an acceptance by the former administration that they were defeated and that the incoming administration won, but that together they are prepared to show the country that power is being handed over from the Republican administration that lost to the Democratic administration that won. It is particularly important, this transfer of power, all of these symbols and these traditions of these moments, they are even more important when there has been a one-term presidency and an incumbent president. It doesn't happen very often, hasn't happened very often in modern American history, but when it does, these moments matter even more so because they show to the country that the departing administration has accepted the result of the election. Donald Trump, of course, over the last 2 months, has not found it easy to accept that. But that moment was the passing of the baton. Brian Lanza, former Trump transition team advisor from the 2016 campaign, joins me now from Alexandria, Virginia. That is why, isn't it, Brian, moments like this, and I'm sure you're watching it on home at television too, it's why it matters.
No, it's critical. It's the message that we send. It's the fiber of who we are to have these peaceful transitions. They were disrupted a couple of weeks ago with 5 tragic deaths and a stampede on the Capitol. But at today, those people who were confused, those people who were lied to, saw Vice President Pence, hand over sort of the keys of our democracy to the next administration, and I think that's critical.
Donald Trump wasn't there. I don't know now whether it would have been better if he had been there or whether it was better that he wasn't there. But with or without him, and there you have to wave goodbye, with or without him, this process that we have just watched in this country for the last 2 hours, even though it was scaled back, even though it wasn't what Joe Biden might have wanted to be, partly because of security and partly because of COVID, it starts, doesn't it, perhaps to rebuild a sense that the democratic institutions have survived the attacks of a couple of weeks ago.
I think it certainly shows that they've been stress tested and the foundation that they were built on are strong, and they can withstand 4 years of Trump, or specifically 2 months of Trump lying about the election results. But the stress test has happened, and we're strong, and we'll be stronger for it. And I think we'll even appreciate it more, just how fragile it is, that it doesn't take much to get us down this path of insurrection.
Brian, you and I have spoken many times about the nature of politics in America. Almost the entirety of Joe Biden's inaugural address, the point of that speech seemed to be to say that unity is not just a nice end. It is not just something we aspire to because it is warm and fuzzy and it feels nice. It is also, in this moment of crisis, the means. It is the tool by which we can address the coronavirus, the economy, racial inequality, the strife that we have seen. Do you think there is any chance that Joe Biden now, day one, and he is going to have to hit the ground running, we know that he's going to issue a slew of up to a dozen executive orders even today, do you think there is any chance that Republicans will decide, okay, we agree, we've got to tackle the big things in this country, and so let's try to find a way to work together on some of them?
You know, it's certainly a heavy task ahead of them. If anybody could do it, it would be a creature of Washington like Joe Biden is. I think the previous guest had said that. But listen, I think it's a heavy task. I mean, we have, you know, D.C. is a divided town. It's based on partisanship. We have corners for reasons. There's apparatuses built to keep consensus away. So, you know, Biden may be the best trained for this. He may be in the best position, best experience. But the apparatus of D.C., the swamp, it's a tough. You know this. Unity is a lofty word, but we all peddle in division.
Yeah, we haven't seen very much of it in Washington, but maybe, as you say, Brian, just bringing the temperature down a bit. We've spoken, I know that you have been a supporter of the president's, but even you have told me that you've been exhausted by the last 4 years. And maybe now we can have a little bit more calm in the country.
Yeah, listen, I'm looking forward to normal. I'm looking forward to hopefully never going on Twitter again. And it's, you know, the country just, you know, sort of needs a little bit normal for the next couple of years as we go through COVID and the heavy challenges ahead. But I think, you know, listen, I was in California, you know, during Schwarzenegger, and it was exciting for 6 years, and then it got boring again with Jerry Brown. It was exciting for 4 years with Trump, and it's going to get boring again with Joe Biden. And I'm okay with that. And I think the country is too.
A little bit of calm. Brian Lanza, thank you very much for joining us. There was not very much in President Biden's inaugural address that talked about the rest of the world, but he did not talk about America first, and he did not talk about American carnage, and that will make a difference. On Capitol Hill, filing out. We've had the dignitaries filing out. Now what's going to happen is that Joe Biden will head over across the river to Arlington Cemetery, where he will lay a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier. In the place of a huge parade that normally happens from the Capitol to the White House. That is not taking place this time because of security concerns, because of COVID concerns as well. But here's the nitty sort of practicalities of this. The new president can't go into the White House for a few hours because they are still having to clear out the stuff of the old president, clean up the rooms, change the curtains, steam the carpets. All of that is going on right now, and that is why, partly, we have this inauguration day. But we have it also because it is a symbol of the change of power in America. This has been an inauguration unlike any other, but it has still been the shift of power. Donald Trump has left Washington. He has gone to Florida. He will not be president of the United States anymore. Now it is Joe Biden. Democrats have taken power. The Biden administration has taken power. And Joe Biden made it clear in his inaugural address that what he wants from this country as he takes on the presidency is for people to reach out to each other, to work together in order to tackle the huge problems that America faces and that he faces. Let's take a look at some of the most key moments of this day, a day that has huge significance, not just here in Washington, but around the world.
I wish the new administration great luck and great success. So, have a good life. We will see you soon. Thank you.
I, Joseph Robinette Biden Jr., do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute
that I will faithfully execute
the office of President of the United States.
the office of President of the United States. To restore the soul and secure the future of America requires so much more than words. It requires the most elusive of all things in a democracy, unity. I understand that many of my fellow Americans view the future with fear and trepidation. I promise you, I get it. We must end this uncivil war. We can do this.
This is BBC World News. I'm Kathy Kay in Washington on a historic day for the United States.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
Joe Biden is sworn in as the 46th President of America, saying democracy has prevailed and pledging to dedicate himself to healing the nation.
On this January day, my whole soul is in this, bringing America together, uniting our people, uniting our nation. And I ask every American to join me in this cause.
Kamala Harris is sworn in as Vice President, becoming the first woman and the first person of color to hold the post. And Lady Gaga belts out the Star-Spangled Banner amid the tightest security in living memory on Capitol Hill. This is the scene live as the Vice President and the President, along with their families, former presidents and other dignitaries, disperse, a transfer of power and an inauguration unlike any we've seen in America. Welcome. A new leadership has taken over in the United States, with Joe Biden sworn in as the country's 46th president and Kamala Harris as its first woman and first person of color as the vice president. In his inaugural address, Mr. Biden called the day one of renewal and hope, and he promised that the people watching the ceremony from beyond America's borders, that his government would re-engage with the world. But he also added that America has much to repair after what he called a winter of peril. His overall message was clear, a strong call for unity. Here's what he had to say.
To restore the soul and secure the future of America requires so much more than words. It requires the most elusive of all things in a democracy, unity. Unity. In another January, on New Year's Day in 1863, Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. When he put pen to paper, the president said, and I quote, "If my name ever goes down into history, it'll be for this act, and my whole soul is in it." My whole soul is in it. Today, on this January day, my whole soul is in this, bringing America together, uniting our people, uniting our nation. And I ask every American to join me in this cause. Uniting to fight the foes we face: anger, resentment and hatred, extremism, lawlessness, violence, disease, joblessness, and hopelessness. With unity, we can do great things, important things. We can right wrongs. We can put people to work in good jobs. We can teach our children in safe schools. We can overcome the deadly virus. We can reward work and rebuild the middle class and make healthcare secure for all. We can deliver racial justice, and we can make America once again the leading force for good in the world. I I know speaking of unity can sound to some like a foolish fantasy these days. I know the forces that divide us are deep and they are real. But I also know they are not new. Our history has been a constant struggle between the American ideal that we're all are created equal and the harsh, ugly reality that racism, nativism, fear, demonization have long torn us apart. The battle is perennial, and victory is never assured. Through Civil War, the Great Depression, World War, 9/11, through struggle, sacrifice, and setbacks, our better angels have always prevailed. In each of these moments, enough of us have come together to carry all of us forward. And we can do that now. History, faith, and reason show the way of unity. We can see each other not as adversaries, but as neighbors. We can treat each other with dignity and respect. We can join forces, stop the shouting, and lower the temperature. For without unity, there is no peace, only bitterness and fury. No progress, only exhausting outrage. No nation, only a state of chaos. This is our historic moment of crisis and challenge. And unity is the path forward. And we must meet this moment as the United States of America. If we do that, I guarantee you we will not fail. We have never, ever, ever, ever failed in America. We've acted together. And so today, at this time, in this place, let's start afresh, all of us. Let's begin to listen to one another again, hear one another, see one another, show respect to one another. Politics doesn't have to be a raging fire, destroying everything in its path. Every disagreement doesn't have to be a cause for total war. And we must reject the culture in which facts themselves are manipulated and even manufactured. My fellow Americans, we have to be different than this. America has to be better than this. And I believe America is so much better than this. Just look around. Here we stand in the shadow of the Capitol Dome, as was mentioned earlier, completed amid the Civil War, when the Union itself was literally hanging in the balance. Yet we endured. We prevailed. Here we stand, looking out on the great mall where Dr. King spoke of his dream. Here we stand where 108 years ago, at another inaugural, thousands of protesters tried to block brave women marching for the right to vote. And today, we mark the swearing in of the first woman in American history elected to national office, Vice President Kamala Harris. Don't tell me things can't change. Here we stand, across the Potomac from Arlington Cemetery, where heroes who gave the last full measure of devotion rest in eternal peace. And here we stand, just days after a riotous mob thought they could use violence to silence the will of the people, to stop the work of our democracy, to drive us from this sacred ground. It did not happen. It will never happen. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. Not ever.
Joe Biden giving his inaugural address as President of the United States 2 weeks after the Capitol walls, exactly the walls where he was standing giving that address, had been breached by rioters, and members of Congress had been under attack from the mob incited by the President of the United States. an extraordinary moment to be having this inauguration in American history in the midst of the pandemic, in the midst of economic crisis, and in the midst clearly of such strong divisions in this country that a mob swarmed the Capitol and desecrated what is one of the symbols of American democracy. But there we had it today, the inauguration ceremony, unlike any other, much pared down, but still a demonstration, not just to Americans, but to the rest of the world as well, that the institutions of democracy here are resilient, and this day of inauguration, part of the process, the beginning of the process of rebuilding confidence in those institutions. Our correspondent Gary O'Donoghue is on the National Mall. Gary, it was not an inauguration like those we have been used to, but it was also very much not an inaugural address like that of Donald Trump. We were both listening to Donald Trump's address 4 years ago. I was listening to this one. Completely different addresses to the country and to the rest of the world.
Yeah, I mean, a real contrast in tone and in substance, of course. There was a darkness and a real kind of, I suppose, negativity to Donald Trump's address 4 years ago. I don't think it's unfair to say that. We remember the phrases, don't we? American carnage, etc. It was a very, very bleak address, and this one was peppered with phrases of unity and togetherness, and what keeps us together is more than what separates us. But he's setting the bar pretty high, isn't he? Because this division didn't start with Donald Trump. It's been endemic in American politics and in American life more broadly for a lot longer than that. And it's, what metric, I suppose, do you choose to see whether or not he manages to do anything about it? How do you judge whether he has any success? And you mentioned the message to the world at the end there. He did address that, didn't he, right at the very end? And it reminded me of that moment a few weeks ago when he introduced his national security team, and he said, America is back. And very much the sense that, by the way, everyone else, we're here again for you. We're going to re-enter our alliances. We're going to try and rebuild those relationships that he believes has been severely damaged over the last 4 years.
Gary, meanwhile, the man who they have taken power from, Donald Trump, has gone down to Florida. If there is to be a return to some sense of normalcy over the course of the last couple of hours, I've had supporters of the president as well say that it's going to be a return to some sense of calm and perhaps a bit less exhausting. Does that depend on what Donald Trump decides to do now, or is he out of the picture just because he's not president anymore?
It's a really good question, isn't it? To what extent was his power entirely wrapped up in being president, and to what extent does the charisma and the following carry on after he loses office? I think we're going to have to wait and see exactly what kind of intervention he tries to make and when he tries to make it, because I think it would be unthinkable, wouldn't it, for Donald Trump just to go quiet and just disappear now. I mean, we know he's not planning to do that. He said he's not planning to do that. But how will he try and leverage his influence, his followers, his ideas? How will he try and do that? Because do it at the wrong time and in the wrong way, and it all falls flat on its face, and then he's humiliated. Do it perhaps in the right way at the right time, and then it could be a real threat and a real powerful force. So I'm sure he's thinking about those things. I'm sure the people that have gone with him, those aides who have going to carry on working with him, his sons, his children, they'll be thinking about those things as well. But you do wonder, don't you, whether, now the sort of the patina of the office has gone, what actually will remain?
Yeah, so Donald Trump, they're down now in Florida. Only 10 American presidents have tried and failed to get a second term in office. He is one of them, but of course he commands the support of millions of Americans around the country, and it'll be interesting to see what they do too. Gary O'Donoghue, thank you very much for joining us. This is Joe Biden's day, and the inaugural celebrations are over. I spoke to a senior Democratic member of Congress just yesterday and said, well, he's going to get a honeymoon period. And she stopped me and said, no, there will be no honeymoon period for Joe Biden. He has to get straight to work. So let's see what that's going to look like and speak to Democratic Congresswoman Madeleine Dean. Congresswoman, thank you very much for joining us. I imagine you've just come from the celebration, so it's kind of you to join us. Watching Joe Biden take office, you get a sense both of the enormity of the task that faces him, but the sense of purpose and resolve he has in trying to reach out across the aisle where possible to get things done. Do you think he can do it?
Good afternoon, Kathy. I am honored to be with you today on this historic American Day. And to be clear, I'm here in my DC apartment where I chose to stay to watch and to work since I am moving forward as one of the impeachment managers. But what I saw today, and I hope you don't mind, I cannot stop smiling. What I saw today is everything you need to know about hope and optimism. As someone texted me, profound American optimism, because it is embodied in the decency of Joe Biden, our now President of the United States, and Kamala Harris, our Vice President. It is a uniquely beautiful American moment at a time of extraordinary levels of controversy, and this president met the moment.
Yeah, it was a pared down ceremony, but no less powerful for being pared down and important as a symbol. These moments in democracy are important. They are as important as the rules that are written down in the Constitution. And the fact that this one took place just 2 weeks after I spoke to you, you had been hiding in your office when the Capitol was attacked, was even more extraordinary. I mean, I think to remind people, 2 weeks ago, your office, your Capitol building was attacked. Today, they managed to hold an inauguration ceremony. That's quite a feat to get that done, isn't it?
It's a feat, and so there's an awful lot of credit to be given to the public servants who selflessly prepared for this day, but also a reflection of who is our host. The host is the president and the vice president, Biden and Kamala Harris. Notice how they moved with grace about the rotunda and the interior of congressional halls. Not only is he someone who worked there for decades, but he graciously greeted members from both parties. That tells you everything you need to know about this president. I also want to say there's something else he did, which was last night. The memorial that he and Kamala Harris hosted, a brief but powerful memorial to the more than 400,000 dead, tells you everything you need to know about how he will handle this presidency. He recognized that in order for us to heal, we must recognize the pain and loss. He was the first to do that as president. And so between that and his graciousness today, but his honesty, you saw and heard his beautiful words. They were uplifting, but they were honest, that we must turn away from lies and disunity. So I'm just delighted for today and the day that we have had.
Both of them, of course, senators, so they know the body that they are dealing with. You mentioned at the beginning, and I was going to bring it up, that you are on the trial team to convict the President of the United States, former President of the United States, Donald Trump, following his impeachment in the House of Representatives. This now will, that article of impeachment will now go at some point, we don't know when, from the House to the Senate, now in Democratic hands, and you will be part of the team that is prosecuting the president in the Senate. In a way, it will be a test of the appeal to unity that Joe Biden has just made. Do you think there will be any unified response from the Senate in its reaction, in its verdict, on whether Donald Trump should be convicted retroactively after his impeachment?
I believe that this is an exact first step toward unity. Last night, Joe Biden said, to heal, we must remember. And he spoke in those terms again today. It is not as though, after an insurrection incited by the outgoing president, we can simply turn the page and say, let's unify. To heal, we must remember. We must shine a light of truth on what happened here. And I believe that the Senate is the exact forum to begin that healing. This trial is that opportunity for all the senators to signal to the United States that that is not who we are. We are not Americans who would attack Americans with impunity. We will not allow a rogue president under his oath of office to incite an insurrection, have 5 people die. We're much better than that. And so it is actually, I believe, the first step toward healing for us to go and honestly try this case in the Senate and the Senate to convict.
Okay, Democratic Congresswoman Madeleine Dean, thank you very much for joining us. You are hearing voices both from the Republican side and the Democratic side in Washington at the moment on Capitol Hill, where Joe Biden just was, calling for unity in the country. The difference is that Democrats are saying there has to be accountability for the attack on Capitol Hill 2 weeks ago before there can be unity. Republicans perhaps wanting to move on a little bit more from those events of 2 weeks ago. Let's get global reaction now to what has happened here in Washington today. We have correspondents Rajini Vaidyanathan in New Delhi, our chief international correspondent Lise Doucette in London, and Tom Bateman, who is in Jerusalem. Let me start with you, Rajini, in Delhi. There was not a huge mention to the rest of the world. It was not like Donald Trump's America First speech, but there was not a lot of mention of America's role in the world or any specific issues that America is going to be dealing with. What do you think they will have made of what they heard there in India?
Well, Cathy, there's 2 things really. There's the political and there's the personal. I suppose the overriding sense here today in India is one of pride because of course, Kamala Harris, the new vice president, is half Indian. And if you look at her Twitter feed today, she talks a lot about how her mother shaped her life and was a huge influence on her. And Shamla Gopalan was born in India and she left South India at the age of 19 to study in the US West Coast, and that's where she met Kamala Harris's father. And so today, before the swearing in, of course, because it's late here in India, there were prayers, there were celebrations, fireworks let off in Kamala Harris's ancestral village. We might be able to actually show you some pictures of those as well. And I think I've talked about this with you before, Cathy, but just how Kamala Harris has spoken of how India really shaped some of her early political ideas. She used to visit India as a child every few years with her mother to visit her grandfather, P.V. Gopalan, who was a civil servant. And when he retired, she would visit him and walk along the beach in Chennai, a city formerly known as Madras. And they would walk along the beach, her grandfather, his friends, and Kamala Harris said she would hold his hand and listen to their conversations about corruption, about democracy, about justice. And she's since said in several interviews that those walks on the beach, and Besant Nagar Beach in Chennai, shaped who she is today. So India really has had a profound impact on her life. And so there's a huge sense of pride there. Just quickly as well, Cathy, I should just say, before I hand over to my colleagues, that I was just flicking through some of the Indian TV channels, and there's not just pride for the fact that Kamala Harris is at the highest office a woman has ever held in the United States as an Indian, but also the fact that the Biden cabinet has something like 20 Indian Americans in it, 13 of those women. And so there was a montage running on Indian TV just now of all those people, people like the Deputy Press Secretary, the Assistant Attorney General, Benita Gupta, the Surgeon General. So, I mean, it's a big day for India on many levels.
I hadn't done those numbers. I can see that. I know there is a lot of pride in this country amongst Asian Americans at Kamala Harris becoming the vice president. Interesting to hear what the reaction is in India as well, too. Let's go to Jerusalem, because there are some countries that are very excited about Joe Biden taking over from Donald Trump, and some countries that are definitely less so. Israel felt it had a real ally in Mr. Trump in the White House. They were never very keen on Barack Obama. What are they making of Joe Biden, and what does it change for Israel that Joe Biden is now president and Donald Trump isn't?
Well, the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, was pretty speedy in getting a message out to congratulate Mr. Biden within minutes after he was sworn in, saying that the warm personal friendship goes back many decades, looking forward to further strengthening the US and Israel alliance. But the reality is, Cathy, that this is the end of an era, as you allude to there, of really unparalleled support from Washington towards Israel. Benjamin Netanyahu had once described President Trump as the greatest friend that Israel had ever had in the White House. And I think the key issue now is going to be over the Iran nuclear deal. This is going to be, Mr. Biden has said, his regional priority when it comes to the Middle East, because what he wants to do is put the US back into that deal. It was the agreement signed by President Obama with the Iranians and 5 other world powers that was supposed to contain Iran's nuclear ambitions. Now, Mr. Biden wants to get the Americans back into it after Donald Trump pulled the US out, albeit with stronger conditions attached to the Iranians. But that will be the first thing on the agenda, I think, when it comes to what Israel wants. Already the lobbying had begun earlier this morning with a statement via its UN ambassador saying that the threat posed by Iran is a key regional challenge, and clearly they'll be looking very closely at all of that. As for the Palestinians, well, they haven't spoken to President Trump for 3 years because of his policies towards the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Now that will all be revived. There'll be a warming of ties, I think, and the Palestinians certainly among those who were looking at Washington today and thinking, or hoping at least, they had a bit more of a friend back in the White House.
Okay, Tom Bateman there for us in Jerusalem. Just to tell you what we were just seeing there, that is Joe Biden with his first official work act, if you like, as President of the United States, signing, he has said that on his first day he's going to be signing roughly a dozen executive orders to address the crises, various crises that are facing America at the moment, including rejoining the Paris Agreement and reversing the travel ban, the Muslim travel ban that Donald Trump had enacted. They will then leave the Capitol and head over to Arlington Cemetery, where they'll lay a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier. Lise Doucette is in London for us. Lise, Joe Biden said America has been tested, but we want to ensure the world that we will engage again. America's allies itching to have Joe Biden engage again, and do you think they're going to actually be as satisfied with that message as they might hope, given that he has so much on his plate here in America that perhaps he can't engage again as much as he might like to?
Well, the phrase he used, Kathy, you started it by saying America has been tested, and his second part of that phrase was that we are stronger for it. You will notice that it was 15 minutes into a 20-minute speech before he actually deliberately said, very explicitly said, now I have a message to the world. And when he did that, he turned around and he said, I include all my colleagues from the Congress and from the Senate, and we all know that the world is watching. But he used phrases that, as I said, America has been tested and we have come out stronger for it. He used that phrase which Americans have used down through many generations, that America will be a beacon to the world. But I think, given the tone of the speech, given the content of the speech, what Joe Biden was trying to say, and nobody around the world, and I've certainly heard it myself, needs to be reminded that his biggest challenges, his biggest problems and crises, they lie at home. But he also referred to the crises that America has been through, an attack on democracy, an attack on truth. He talked about the climate crisis, systemic racism, inequity. All of those problems, of course, are not just America's problems, but they are the problems of the world. And he went back to that phrase, Kathy, that I'm sure you've heard time and again. We will lead not by the example of our power, but by the power of our example. Deliberately or not, the camera then panned to some of the soldiers who were standing in front of standing there to secure this ring. And I thought, oh, are they sending a bit, either a clever camera person, or this was a deliberate message to the rest of the world. So yes, the rest of the world would have been reassured about him re-engaging to solve problems of peace and progress and security, about American leadership. But they know this is a different America, and quite frankly, a different rest of the world.
It is a different world that Joe Biden is coming into, but I guess it's worth, just on this day that Donald Trump has departed office, and I sat up here, Lise, 4 years ago as we were hosting our coverage of Donald Trump's inauguration, and I think we were all slightly blindsided by the tone of Donald Trump's inaugural address to the rest of the world. And he really threw down the gauntlet to America's allies with his speech that was about America first and how he was always going to put America first. And maybe that in and of itself, perhaps Joe Biden can't deliver on everything he wants to do. Yes, he's going to sign executive orders to re-enter Paris. Yes, he will look at the Iran nuclear deal again, of course, with a more favorable eye. Maybe he can't do everything he wants to do in global terms, but just the very fact of having this different tone from that speech of 4 years ago to that speech of today, I can almost hear the sigh of relief in some of the capitals in Europe amongst America's allies, that they can expect, they hope, a return to normalcy.
Yes, you can hear the sigh of relief. You saw the message on Twitter by Ursula von der Leyen, who basically said America is back and showed a picture of herself smiling. They're looking forward. If it hadn't been for the pandemic, they would be looking forward to those hugs in the hallway and saying, well, it'll be not just welcome, but welcome back. Some of the people that they dealt with on all of the major challenges of our time, the Iran nuclear deal, the climate crisis, the Israeli-Palestinian problems, the rise of Islamic State. The problem is that they'll be meeting again to deal with these problems, but not just because of 4 years of President Trump, but all of these problems, and some of them have to be laid at President Trump's doors, are much worse. So yes, in terms of America's allies, they will be waiting. But there are many around the world too who have listened even more closely to the Senate confirmation hearings yesterday, including the 4.5 hours that the incoming or the proposed Secretary of State Anthony Blinken went through as he was grilled by the Senate committee about what would be America's approach on China, what about the Israeli-Palestinian peace process, ending the war in Yemen, the Iran nuclear deal. They would have been poring over those details to see where America is heading. Today was a day of soaring rhetoric to say that America, it's a humble message. America has been through this really grueling experience. America is broken. Well, not broken, but people tried to break America. Crises tried to break America, but we have come back stronger, and we are going to take the strength and work with the rest of the world. Some capitals in the world will be waiting to deal with Biden. Some of them will be wary, and some of them realize, for better or worse, they have to deal with the United States in this world.
Okay, Lise Doucette, thank you, Lise, as ever. Such a pleasure to talk to you about all of this that is going on here in America and America's reaction around the world to events here. Thank you for joining us. We're just looking here. There is a scaled down. This is a scaled down inauguration. Normally there's a massive parade from the Capitol to the White House, and the president and the new vice president jump out of their cars and they walk through some of it. But there is a scaled down version of that, and you can see some of that starting to take place. They'll be leaving the Capitol to walk up to the White House a couple of miles ago. Let's talk to the Democratic mayor of Chicago, Lori Lightfoot. Mayor, thank you for joining me. Joe Biden comes into office with an absolutely daunting inbox of challenges, and he laid them out in his inaugural address. He was honest about the challenges he faces and the country faces. What do you think he has to do first?
Well, I think he started doing that today. He addressed the nation and really addressed the world from a position of humility, to say strongly that America is back, but to say that we're going to lead by the power of our example. And one of the many lines that I think will be cited over and over again from his inaugural address today. He's a man that comes from humble origins, has led a life of service, and is calling Americans to come together in this difficult time. Yes, there's a long list of challenges that lie ahead of him, but remember, when he came into office as vice president, not that long ago, we were facing a worldwide economic meltdown and all the consequences that flow from that. So he's a man that's been challenged both in his personal life, but also as a public servant, and I feel very confident that he's up to the challenge.
Mayor, your city, Chicago, has been hit hard by the coronavirus pandemic. What specifically do you hope that Joe Biden coming into office will do to help your city deal with COVID?
Well, first of all, that's already started. To be in partnership with an administration that wants to help and not hurt our city is a welcome change from what we've experienced over the last 4 years. And we've been very clear we need additional resources, both to help build out our infrastructure for vaccine delivery, but we also need more vaccine. It is simply shameful that the Trump administration has effectively left the vaccine cupboard bare, as we've now learned over the last couple of days. But I'm confident in this new team and the president and the vice president that they understand the needs of cities because they've been listening since right after their election. So I look forward to the partnership. There's a lot of work that needs to be done, but the most important thing is to bring hope that there is a new dawn that's going to be shining all over this country, and particularly here in Chicago.
Okay, Lori Lightfoot, Mayor of Chicago, thank you very much for joining us. Cities all around this country, of course, now looking to see what Joe Biden can do to help their cities and their people deal with the coronavirus crisis, help with the vaccine rollout. That is going to be enormous. Help with test and trace, help with treatment in hospitals. There is so much that Joe Biden has to do. Here we are looking at the rotunda of the Capitol and the inauguration of Joe Biden. You're watching BBC News in the UK and around the world. Joe Biden has been sworn in now as President of the United States, promising to end the uncivil war in a deeply divided country. Unity was the core of his message in his inaugural speech, and much of it was directed to his colleagues who were sitting there in Congress. Take a listen. See if we can pull up.
We must meet this moment as the United States of America. If we do that, I guarantee you we will not fail. We have never, ever, ever, ever failed in America. We've acted together. And so today, at this time, in this place, let's start afresh. All of us. Let's begin to listen to one another again. Hear one another. See one another. Show respect to one another. Politics doesn't have to be a raging fire, destroying everything in its path. Every disagreement doesn't have to be a cause for total war. And we must reject the culture in which facts themselves are manipulated and even manufactured.
Joe Biden there. Also speaking was the senator for Minnesota, Democratic Senator Amy Klobuchar. She at one time was hoping to, actually did compete against Joe Biden and Kamala Harris for the Democratic nomination to be president. She gave an emotional speech.
When Abraham Lincoln gave his first inaugural address in front of his Capitol, the dome was only partially constructed, braced by ropes of steel. He promised he would finish it. He was criticized for spending funds on it during the Civil War. To those critics, he replied, "If the people see the Capitol going on, it is a sign we intend the Union shall go on." And it did, and it will. Generations of Americans gave their lives to preserve our republic in this place. Great legislation to protect civil rights and economic security and lead the world was debated and crafted under this dome. Now it falls on all of us, not just the two leaders we are inaugurating today, to take up the torch of our democracy, not as a weapon of political arson, but as an instrument for good. We pledge today never to take our democracy for granted as we celebrate its remarkable strength. We celebrate its resilience, its grit. We celebrate the ordinary people doing extraordinary things for our nation, the doctors and nurses on the front line of this pandemic, the officers in the Capitol, a new generation never giving up hope for justice. We celebrate a new president, Joe Biden, who vows to restore the soul of America and cross the river of our divides to a higher plane. And we celebrate our first African American, first Asian American, and first woman vice president, Kamala Harris, who stands on the shoulders of so many on this platform who have forged the way to this day.
Robert Sheldon.
Amy Klobuchar, the senator from Minnesota. So this is what's happening right at the moment inside the Capitol building behind us. There was meant to be an inaugural lunch. That is what normally happens. Unfortunately, that can't take place. And so we are having an exchange of gifts instead, in which members of Congress are giving the Bidens gifts that are symbolic and important to do with American history and politics and perhaps the state that they come from. And here it looks, it's hard to see behind the masks, but I think we have Roy Blunt, who is the Republican who is presiding over the proceedings earlier, who is giving Joe Biden and Dr. Jill Biden a painting. And there are going to be a series of these givings of gifts, and then those gifts, of course, will go to the White House, and they will be part of the White House collection. But this is all because of COVID. We cannot have the traditional inaugural lunch, which is why we're having this rather truncated event instead. And then the president and Dr. Jill Biden, the First Lady, remember they've already been Vice President and Second Lady, so they are very aware of everything that happens in terms of ceremony and what happens in the White House and the goings on at the White House. They will then go to Arlington National Cemetery to lay a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier. So that is, they've had one gift, and now I think they're going on to receive another gift. Yes, they are getting glass vases offered to them from another state. And each of these are specific
very first second gentleman.
Each.
On behalf of the American people, it is our honor.
This is actually Amy Klobuchar, who we heard speaking earlier.
Commemorating your historic inauguration. Lennox, which you know is a great company, American company, has handcrafted these gifts for the past 9 presidential inaugurations. It is a good thing I don't have to hand them to you personally. They each weigh with the base 32 pounds, but combined 64. But Jill, I know, is very strong and could take them both. Exactly. But the Lennox company is actually based in Bristol, Pennsylvania, which you know, Mr. President, is a mere 132 miles from Scranton. Since we know today all roads lead to Scranton. The team at Lennox has worked for months to capture the spirit of this inauguration and your incoming administration. Mr. President, your vase features the White House, and Vice President Harris's features the U.S. Capitol. The gifts represent the hope and the faith the American people have placed in you to move our country forward. Thank you. Thank you.
And now this is interesting, because having received these gifts from the Democratic Senator Amy Klobuchar and her husband, Jill Biden and Joe Biden, move along and get the next gift. And this is from Mitch McConnell, the Senate Republican leader, and his wife, Elaine Chao, and they will receive from them the American flag. Worth listening in to how Mitch McConnell has his first interaction with the new president.
Well, the pandemic has sadly limited our usual hospitality, as others have mentioned. I'm very glad we still carry on some of our favorite inaugural traditions. It's my honor and privilege to help present these flags of our nation that were flown over today's event here at the Capitol. Now, I have to make one point of personal privilege on behalf of the Senate. With all due respect to our distinguished speaker and our colleagues from the House, I have to note, not only did we just swear in a son and daughter of the Senate to these offices, but indeed both these former senators skipped the House altogether. The Star-Spangled Banner is our greatest symbol of our endurance of the American idea. It flies over this building on triumphant days and on tragic ones, over all factions and all parties. And today this flag flew over our former colleague's inauguration as the very first female Vice President of the United States. So to our very distinguished former colleague, Madam Vice President, please accept this flag with the highest compliments and congratulations of the United States Senate.
to say I had a little smile on my face listening to Mitch McConnell congratulate Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. Mitch McConnell has had a tricky relationship sometimes with Democrats. He is a tough Republican leader, so it'll be interesting to see when this nice moment of comedy stretches forward. Let's take a listen to Nancy Pelosi.
The flag that was flown when you were sworn in, Mr. President. This flag may reflect all that is said about your inauguration. America united. May it be a symbol of the hope, the healing, and the just all of the enthusiasm that you have for our country. And as we heard the beautiful national anthem, when we're at the stadium and they say, is our flag still there? Then you say, play ball. Right there, play ball. So we're going to get ready to play ball. We're ready to go with the inspiration of our flag flying. But again, on behalf of the House of Representatives, it is my privilege to extend to you the flag that was flown the early moment that you were sworn in as President of the United States. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Dr. Biden. Thank you. If we had the lunch, we would have had California wine. Is that not right? Madam Vice President, Mr. Emhoff, congratulations. With liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Nancy Pelosi there. California wine, because Nancy Pelosi comes from California, and of course Kamala Harris also comes from California. I'm joined watching all of this. We have with us Republican analyst Ron Christie, former advisor to President George W. Bush, and Amanda Renteria, who worked on Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign, who is in California as well. A moment for California wine. Amanda, I hope you're managing to crack open a bottle of California wine today. Amanda, watching all of this, it is the sort of pomp and circumstance of inauguration. It's the oil that greases the wheel of democracy. This is not the inauguration that is traditional. There was no Donald Trump, there was no luncheon. For lots of different reasons, things were not normal. But it managed to be still a celebration of democracy at a moment when that building, Capitol Hill in particular, perhaps needed it more than ever.
That's right. I mean, I have to say, the production today, everything that came together, as President Biden would say, met the moment. It was filled with sincerity, a hope. And even though these ceremonial moments aren't like what they were before, in some ways they're even elevated even more. Seeing a bipartisan leadership go to the church this morning, hearing McConnell right now make a silly joke. I mean, these are some of the simple things that is going to be required to rebuild that trust again. And so it is good to see the jokes and the laughing in the rotunda, that same rotunda that just 2 weeks ago we all looked at with horror. So I do believe it's meeting its moment, and it continues to do so even in the backroom conversations and the formalities. You're sensing a coming together, and the question is going to be, how does that continue moving forward?
It was a really geeky inside joke, it has to be said, that they had gone to the Senate but not the House, and he took a point of pride on that. Ron, as you watched this, I mean, it occurs to me that it does matter that both Kamala Harris and Joe Biden have spent years between them, decades between them, in the Senate. Does it make it easier to get some of the things done that Joe Biden now wants to do?
I think so, Kathy. I think when you look at the way that the United States Senate operates, it's the club, right? And there are only 100 members of that club. And now the two top representatives in the White House are former members of the United States Senate. They know all the people on Capitol Hill who are really going to be making the critical decisions. And we know that Kamala Harris has had a difficult relationship with Majority Leader, now outgoing Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, but they still know how the game is played. And more importantly, in the United States Senate, even more than the House, it's the art of the deal. And who knows that better than anyone than Joe Biden, who's been there for most of his professional career.
And Ron, of course, Kamala Harris isn't just vice president, she's the deciding vote in the Senate, because the Senate is split 50-50 between Democrats and Republicans. If there is a tie, and I'm sure there will be quite often, she gets called in to give the deciding vote in favor of the Democrats. That's going to change her role as vice president too, isn't it?
It really will, Kathy, and we talked about this a few weeks ago when I worked for Vice President Cheney, how many times that we would leave the White House complex in a motorcade, zoom down to the Capitol, and have the Vice President on standby to break that 50-50 tie where need be. And so her role is going to be, obviously, the right hand of the President, but in her constitutional role as the President of the United States Senate, I believe early and often she'll be called upon to break ties and then move legislation to the President's desk.
Okay, Ron Christie, Amanda Renteria, thank you very much for joining me during the course of this inauguration coverage. We are going to carry on watching these live pictures. What happens now is they've had their gifts. I think that was the very last gift, and then they hop in a motorcade and they go across the river to Arlington Cemetery, which is a couple of miles away from the Capitol building, and there they will lay the wreath, and then they will go back to the White House for a virtual parade ceremony, which has been taped. Bruce Springsteen will perform, others will perform. There cannot be a live ceremony in the way that there usually is, so there's going to be a virtual around the 50 states of America will be part of this virtual film that we're going to see later on. And off they go. There you can see Joe Biden and his wife, Dr. Jill Biden, now making their way out of Capitol Hill and onto Arlington Cemetery. Let's speak to Austin Goolsbee. He's professor of economics at the University of Chicago's School of Business. Austin, thank you very much for joining me. And I should say that you served in the Obama administration. So are you coming back to Washington to join the Biden administration anytime soon?
I don't think so anytime soon. I worked closely with him in the Obama administration in the first term, and I'm a big fan and supporter of his.
He has laid out in his speech a lot of what he has to do, and a big chunk of that revolves around economics. The country is, many people are on their knees because of the pandemic. Millions of Americans have lost their jobs. What does he want to do to try to help the country economically? What are his priorities?
Well, Kathy, you said it well. It's a daunting challenge. The party ends today, and then all the hard work begins. I think it's summarized in his inaugural address by his phrase, "this winter of peril." The number one thing that has to happen, not just for public health, but for the economy too, is they got to get control of the spread of the virus. That's the thing that sent the economy into a tailspin, and it's really hard to see us coming out of the tailspin until we've got control of that. So that's going to be step one, but he's not waiting. They've outlined what President Biden's calling the Build Back Better agenda that's going to have aggressive dealing with the climate crisis, is going to aggressively try to press an increase in infrastructure spending, put a big focus on what he calls the care economy, which is healthcare, childcare, education, and money for those, and then some relief, both related to racial inequities that have existed for a long time, and just trying to provide relief to people who are at risk. When you add all those things together, it's in the trillions of dollars. So he will definitely need legislation to do this. These aren't things that can be done by executive orders, but he basically outlined those are going to be his priorities.
Austin, he has an absolutely massive spending plan in the works to give relief, $1,400 in direct payments to Americans because of COVID, raising the minimum wage, expanding childcare, tax credits. It's a huge package that he is going to go back to that Congress to ask for. His incoming Treasury Secretary has made it clear that this is a moment, she thinks, Janet Yellen, to spend a lot of money, to get America out of the crisis by spending a lot of money and stop worrying about deficits, at least for the moment. Now, Republicans for the last 4 years don't seem to have been too worried about deficits. They've exploded in the country. They could start worrying about deficits suddenly now and try to block the new president in his agenda, couldn't they?
There's no doubt that I think that they will attempt to do that. Just as with Barack Obama, they attempted to use the argument, but what about the deficit, to try to prevent the incoming president from carrying out his electoral mandate. I don't think the Democrats are going to be all that sympathetic to the argument right now, because we just saw the same people making that argument say it was fine to run up the deficit when a Republican was the president. So I think more will hinge on the Democratic control of the Senate and what the 50th Democratic senator thinks than perhaps what the Republicans think.
Austin Goolsbee in Chicago, thank you very much for joining us.
Great to see you.
Well, the Reverend Dr. William Barber is a senior Protestant pastor in North Carolina, and he joins us now. Dr. Barber, you are co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign. You were listening to Joe Biden's inaugural address. You've been listening to him out the course of the last day or two as he came here to Washington as well. Is there a shift now for America's more disadvantaged now that Joe Biden is coming into office?
Well, I think there is. Tomorrow I'm scheduled to give the inaugural homily at the interfaith service at the National Cathedral. And I'm going to be talking about what our deepest constitutional values and religious values say about how if a nation is going to be whole and healed, it must start with building up from the bottom. The name Joseph means he will add in Hebrew. And when President Biden came to the Poor People's Campaign event in September before he was elected, to over 1 million people, he said to us that ending poverty will not just be an aspiration, but a theory of change. He said to build a new economy that includes everyone, where we reward hard work and we care for the most vulnerable among us. The truth of the matter is, not to deal with the issue of poverty and low wealth would be constitutionally inconsistent, morally indefensible, and economically insane. COVID exposed
Dr. Barber, do you think...
Yes.
Do you think he needs the unity that he talked about today with Republicans in order to do those things?
Well, we certainly hope for that unity. We hope that the moment we're in, COVID has us in a place where we can't ignore poverty and racial disparity. We had 140 million people in poverty before COVID. We've had 8 million people added since May. I don't know how any person in the Senate or the House can now stand against these issues. Billionaires have made $1 trillion since May, and more people have been put out of their homes and lost their jobs. What we know is in the packages that he's presenting, for instance, he says, I want to do a federal living wage to $15 an hour. That's huge for 62 million people.
We are out of time. Thank you so much for joining us on this special coverage of Joe Biden's inauguration as 46th President of America.
This is the incredible story of our civilization's ceaseless desire to move. I'm Sean Riley. I've always been fascinated by speed. Come with me on a journey.
Hi, I'm Virgil van Dijk.
Good strength from Van Dijk. Just look at the speed.
What brave defending effort, Van Dijk.
Download the Flow Sports app to watch the Premier League on Rush.
On the Flow Sports app, you choose what you watch. Download now.
Top 8 answers on the board. Let's just go and get the party started. Name a way a woman can flirt with a man without...
Oh, I did it so fast, didn't I?
This is not how you play the game.
Lots of showers and
and storms in the southeast. We're keeping an eye on this system. That's Tropical Storm Eloise, which is strengthening now over the Mozambique Channel, heading down towards southern Mozambique by the end of the week, where it could make landfall as a cyclone. Across the Middle East, we've got a shamal, which has brought some lower temperatures.